Hey everyone, Cory Camp here, host for the Coach Replay Show. And I'm super excited to have on one of my now good friends. I mean, we are just kind of soul sisters. I think we realized this in our few interactions together over the past year or so. And I'm excited to have her on for yet another micro episode. So just real quick, without going too far into this, Coach Replay Show is one of the highlights of my job. It's one of my favorite things I get to do because I get to talk to people from all walks of education, but really interesting topics around instructional leadership and coaching. And sometimes I get really engulfed in these conversations. Plus, I'm a talker, and our episodes get kind of long. So the challenge this year is that Cory can really stick to 10 minutes or less. Now, this intro is not counting as part of that 10 minutes, but in a second, I'm going to hit a timer for 10 minutes. And it's really for me, but it might be for Allison too, because Allison and I can chat it up for a bit. We're going to try to stick to our episode topic, give you all that we can in 10 minutes or less. So last time we did a micro episode, it was with Kim, and we did it and we were surprised because she didn't think I could. We'll see if we can this time. You ready, Allison? Are you ready for it?
We can do it.
Okay. Before I hit the timer, tell everybody really quick just a little bit about yourself. Who is Allison Curran?
Sure. Currently, I'm an instructional coach at an educational service center in Ohio. But before that, I taught for 17 years. In my time as a coach, I've also been able to join into our mental wellness team efforts. And so I have credential that I've earned that's a resilience and trauma for education practitioner credential. So I can't do therapy, nor do I want to, but I can notice and help support resilience and efforts in the classroom.
I love that. I love that. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to pull up my super fancy technical timer. Our video editor is going to put something way cooler here. I just know Shafay is going to. So here we go. 10 minutes. We're on the clock. So I'm really excited. You mentioned mental wellness and health, and that's the focus for this month of October. If you're watching this after October, the reason I have spiders behind my head is because it's October here. It's almost Halloween. But my background is psychology, and so I'm really interested in some of the points that you're going to bring to us as we talk about this really important topic in mental wellness, something that has been at the forefront for the past few years, since the pandemic especially, this idea of resiliency. And you've got a few tips or considerations really for us as we think about bringing resilience into our practice, especially as coaches. So before we get into those considerations, what is resiliency? Can you sum it up for us real quick? Give us
Sure. The quickest definition really is that it's that capacity to recover. So, but we know it goes hand in hand with trauma as well. So you have to kind of think about that resiliency is this ability to recover, and it's not the same for every single person. So it's not like a tool bag that you can have on hand.
Right. It's not the same, right? Like every tool in your tool bag, if it was one, doesn't always work the same way for every person, right? Because we're each individual and we bring all of our own experiences to that. So let's talk about this idea, this kind of tool bag of tricks. What's the first thing you have for us about resiliency?
I think a pretty important consideration that has come from my own learning in this area is that I used to think that resilience was like grit. It was like this kind of thought that you could fill your tool bag, and things like we might see in a building, mindful music or something like that. Those aren't bad efforts, but maybe a learner or maybe an adult in the building needs a mindful moment that doesn't happen at the beginning of the day. Maybe they need to have strategies in their own memory banks as to how they can respond to something when something difficult comes around. So it's not really grit. And I appreciate that too now, because I also think that from an equity standpoint, grit is not really an equitable concept. Sometimes the grittiest kids we know probably come from settings that they have the most resilience, the most, what I call the pools of resilience. They may have all kinds of resiliency toolkit pieces that we're not putting into their toolkit at school. So I think that I love the thought of thinking of resilience as building. It's kind of my second consideration, actually. It's building into the fact that resilience is a body memory. And so we have to actually, in school, not so much give strategies into a toolkit, but give their bodies memories of resilience. So we can feed those pools of resilience that they need when the difficult times come.
Well, can you give me an example of kind of creating these memories? Like, what might that?
Yeah, absolutely. So can I actually start back a little bit as to why we know it's a body memory? And then we'll get into those strategies, because that's actually my third consideration.
Okay.
So the thing about many of us have known about trauma for a long time. And we think about it being the experience of trauma, but it's actually the perception. It's the way that our body responds to that trauma. And then it's the way our body might hold on to the memories of that trauma that actually cause it to have an impact. But the good, like, hopeful thing is that resilience works the same way. So we build neural pathways in the brain by offering body memories of resilience, which I said I'd get to. We offer those to them, and it starts kind of like carving, as if your brain's a forest. It starts like carving a new pathway through your brain that allows you to access that pool of resilience when you need it. And so I just think it's pretty hopeful to know that while trauma lives in our body and kind of lives in our memory banks of our body, so can resilience. So we can't change a person's perception, but we could build new neural pathways of resilience in their brain. That's why I kind of think that educators of all types are brain surgeons by default, because that's our kind of our goal, is to like build these new neural pathways through their brain.
You know, as you were sharing that, it kind of made me think. I've got a little one, Bladen, at home, who's getting ready to crawl, but very quickly he'll be running. And you know, one of the biggest pieces of wisdom that I got from an aunt of mine was like, don't overreact when they fall. Like, pause, let them feel how they're going to react, and then assure them it's okay. And don't make it a big deal. Otherwise, you're going to have a kid who's going to, make it a really big deal, which isn't a problem. But I think of that in like, yes, my toddler's still going to fall, and yes, it's going to hurt, but how fast will he bounce back from that and be like, it's okay. Like, yeah, I got hurt, I'll just be more careful next time, as opposed to like, I got hurt, my day is ruined, give me a popsicle and I'm done. Right. So I don't know. I kind of think of it in like even our earliest stages of kind of learning resilience, right? Like in the idea of like, I've had the experience of bouncing back just as much as I've had the experience of failing and trauma. And if we can, like you said, just dig more of those pathways so it's familiar to them when they are faced with trauma or anything that would be a call for resiliency, that it's familiar. Resilience is familiar for them to be able to lean on.
Yeah, I think that's it's a super instructive example, because first of all, you use the word bounce back. That's a body memory word. That's not really. So when we associate resilience and we think we're playing mindful music and we're going to get that response, we have to also help kids understand, or adults in the building understand, that resilience comes because you are de-escalating by really getting your vagus nerve involved in the process. I've heard it called the tend and befriend system. Instead of the fight, flight, freeze, there's also a tend and befriend system that's the regulation. So bounce back was key to that. And then another instructive part of that, as you said, to kind of wait and see, because everybody can have an experience. there might be something that happens. And I don't want to name a lot of the experiences that people could have because they could be a trigger for somebody. But imagine that it's how our body responds and how much it holds on to that physiology. So you can kind of see the physiological response come out. If it's going to just last a minute, it might be tears, it might be heavy breathing, it might be sweatiness or something. But sometimes our body holds on to that memory for a long time. And that's the kind of trauma that can build a pathway in our brain. So to that point, resilience is a very natural thing in our brains, but accessing it requires us to, feed those body memories. And that kind of comes to that third point, because I know you're dying to know.
I am. And I'm also looking at our time. Go.
Yeah.
Accessing our pools first of all, pools of resilience. It makes me want to sing a song. I don't know what song yet. Feeling like a 90s song. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think it's this concept really about these resilience experiences really stem in the part of our brain that is called the anterior cingulate cortex. It's the part of our brain that touches the fight, flight, freeze amygdala part of our brain, but it also touches the cognitive part of our brain. So it has this ability to light up both parts of our brain. And in doing that, we create resilience. And you won't be surprised to find out what are those experiences: joy, gratitude, hope, curiosity. So these are just some, but they are the things that we feel them physiologically. Like if I asked you where joy lives, almost everybody can think of a body memory that associate with joy. And then if we can, access that joy and talk about it and say, remind yourself of a joyful moment. Think of a joyful thing. Do the joyful, thinking in this moment. We actually light up that part of our brain that starts to build neural pathways. So for learners, we can do this in a classroom all the time. We could take time for joy and gratitude and hope and curiosity. And in coaching, we can do that with coachees. We can help them access their joy, access their gratitude, access their curiosity. And that's I would love for that to be my job description as a coach.
Oh my God. There it is. Okay. So, perfect timing. I love that. Folks, if you want to learn more about resiliency, this kind of mindset shift that Allison's been talking about, body memories, and how really, I think the crux of this is right at the very end, how we can help our teachers and our students, right? All the learners in our building access these pools of resilience. I love this idea that it lights up kind of both parts of our brain. And that's really where we can have an impact. So download our notes and takeaways for today's episode. That's all we have for you because it is supposed to be a micro episode. Allison, thank you so much for joining me on this. And I know we'll have you back. So let us know if you want Allison to come on and talk more about some of these ideas or some other things that you heard her talk about. Thanks, Allison.
Thank you.